It all began with a stone, or so the legend says. In ages past, a sentient jewel, enormous and beautiful, banished the darkness. Its many-colored light filled the world with life and brought forth mighty gods. Bathed in that light, the world entered an age of bliss, until after a time, the gods fell into slumber. That world was called Vana'diel.
Well, I'm going to have to handle this one a little differently to the usual. Firstly, it isn't a retrospective. As such, the following will be addressing the game as it stands in 2009, with 4 of its expansions and every other little addition out. Secondly, unlike those games that come unchanged on a cartridge or a disc, the judgment cannot be quite as final. What I say now may be total bollocks in a few months, so it may stay the same. Only the gods at Square-enix know for sure. Released first on May 16, 2002 for the PlayStation 2 in Japan, Final Fantasy XI was the first MMORPG in the series, and also a controversial addition to the ranks of the canon fantasies. There are those who believe a massively multiplayer game cannot compete with the storytelling prowess of its peers. Well, aren't you a little tired of Aryan main characters getting off with brunettes as the main plot point? No? Well, we'll look into that later. Now, in around 2 years, the title slowly drifted around the globe's main markets, hitting the Americas in 2003, and finally those pesky Europeans and Oceanians in late 2004. The game is also one of those rarest of breeds, a multi-platform Final Fantasy. Way before 13 decided it would kick Sony's shackles and its fanboys in the balls, this title was available on more than simply the PlayStation 2. Unless you were in the PAL boondocks of the gaming world, which only received the Windows PC and Xbox 360 ports. Better yet, all 3 platforms allowed people to play together. Not only are the platforms not segregated, neither are the servers, allowing you to play with people from the whole planet without any significant drop in quality. Unless they're dickheads, obviously. I couldn't possibly include everything in 10 minutes, so I'll just skim the cream from the proverbial dishwater. Now onto the meat of the cow that's feeding Square-enix massive amounts of real-world gil, and funding all the compilation of Final Fantasy VII nonsense then. So how does Final Fantasy fare with other people to bugger it up then? Let's start where everyone does. The decidedly basic character creation. After giving Square all your juicy details through their failed Play Online front end, you'll be allowed to create an avatar for use in the game proper. There are 5 races: the bog standard Hume, which excel at being generic, the arrogant Alvin, whom enjoy shoving their crotches into the faces of their enemies and are statistically the strongest and most stupid race, the Mithra, the perv's favourite, exquisitely furry and equally furious. They come on top with agility and dexterity. Following their heels are the diminutive Taru Taru, who find their immense magical power lies in their collective childish speech impediments. And finally, the Galka, hulking powerhouses that really should be voiced by Michael Dorn, whom gain their massive vitality from years of subservience to the Humes. Whichever you pick, you'll be able to make minimal customization. The character's height, job, home nation and server can all be selected. Don't worry too much though, as the only things that can't be changed at a later date are the height and waist selections. Jobs are integral to your experience in Vana'diel. Initially you're restricted to the 6 initial jobs. You know them. They're the ones that kickstarted everything back in Final Fantasy I. Warrior, White Mage, Black Mage, Red Mage, Monk and Thief. Each has their own pros and cons and roles to fill in a party later on. When you reach the 30th level, options open up. Quests are available to unlock 14 other available jobs, most of these having varying difficulty levels, and it's likely a level 30 player would struggle to come out on top alone. But Beastmaster, Bard, Paladin, Dark Knight, Ranger, Summoner, Dragoon, Samurai, Ninja, Blue Mage, Corsair, Puppet Master, Dancer and Scholar will now be available to you. Newly unlocked jobs appear at level 1 and must be leveled independently, but the ability to freely change class on a whim is incredibly liberating. This allows the same person to have a handful of jobs leveled in order to fill multiple roles. Then again, we can't all be bards. Play the one you like most. When you do level them up, you'll be introduced to a colourful cast of characters related to the job that will guide you into its own little niche storyline that usually grants insight into the main arc the job was included in, and as an added bonus, artifact armour for that genuine retro feel. Jobs aren't that one-dimensional though. Upon fulfilling certain requirements, you're able to equip any of the jobs as a support job. This will grant you the abilities, traits and spells that job would have had were it half the level of your main, assuming it has already been leveled to or beyond that point. For example, if a summoner is at a cap of 75 and it had White Mage as a support job, it would possess all the abilities innate to a 37 White Mage. Many jobs, however, have preconceived sub-job combinations, so don't rock the boat too much with your self-proclaimed Scarlet Warrior melee eliteness in an experienced party. Just to remind you you're playing a Final Fantasy game, it features a massive amount of cutscenes that propel the main storyline arcs towards conclusion. These mostly apply to the missions, though as the game's aged, more and more of the town quests have included choreographed cutscenes too. Series staples return to the fray, including the 11th incarnation of Cid, Moogles that keep all your shit together, Chocobo that can be ridden once a quest is completed, airships, monsters like Marlboros, Cactuar, Ochu, Bombs, Soulflayers and Puddings. Summons include the usual trio of Shiva, Ifrit and Ramuh, but they're joined by less commonly used Leviathan, Titan, Fenrir, Carbuncle and Diabolos. The missions are probably the main draw for the average Final Fantasy fan. With you cast in the lead role, you'll discover the secrets that lie under the surface of this world, whether it be destroying the reincarnation of the Shadow Lord, preventing the surviving Zilart from reopening the Gate of the Gods, personally taking down a meteor-spamming loser, preventing Odin and Alexander bringing on the Ragnarok, or discovering the secrets of Vana'diel of the past. You'll find it hard to hate the narrative. Each expansion adds complexity while ramping up the physical acting of the participants, and adding a truckload of new characters to converse with in a whole bevy of new areas. Though you won't see much without some grinding under your belt. Like any other RPG, online or off, there's a fair amount of experience to gather. There are a few ways to gain this. The most obvious is to locate a group of like-minded adventurers and go and kick the living shite out of the flora and fauna of the world. Each monster drops experience based on its perceived difficulty against the player or players involved. This usually creates level gaps between the monster and the player. Nowadays, however, you won't even have to find people at the same level as you to fight for the experience, as your friends can be synced down to your level for some mutual and often more economical battling. They won't even have to get their lower level gear out, as this is also synced down. Another way of gaining experience is to engage in Fields of Valor. These small quests can be taken each Vana'diel day in order to gain extra experience and gil as a reward. The aim is to meet the quota that a page asks in monster kills. For instance, it may ask you to kill 6 worms in Gusterberg. This speeds up early leveling significantly. When you mature enough, you'll gain several additional outlets in Besieged, a large-scale battle event wherein up to 700 players fight to defend the Imperial city of Arturgan and crash their Xboxes, and Campaign, which is similar to Besieged but on a smaller scale and more easily dropped into. All of these are viable and some attempt to break down the monotony of the grind. You can even get experience rewards from Chains of Promathia related missions that you've already completed and are helping someone else complete as an incentive, should you need one, as these are considered the most difficult. Combat is pretty simple. Much of the game's system was poached by Sky Pirates for use in Ivalice during the events of Final Fantasy XII, where the judges seemingly lifted the ban on non-turn-based combat until they accidentally all died and everything all went a little bit too real-time strategy. Thing is though, it isn't a bad system. When you engage an opponent, you'll notice that your character begins to attack automatically. They will continue their attacks so long as the enemy remains in range. The attack speed is based on the equipment you're using. Typically, the larger the weapon, the longer the delay. Certain gear that grants haste can improve the delay timer, but otherwise they're set for each type of weapon. Once you finally reach cap level, there are many options at your disposal. You'll be hard pressed not to find a link shell waiting to exploit you for their own personal gain, and yours as well, given time. There's a lot of optional bosses to partake in: Bahamut, Diabolos' Dream Realm of Dynamis, Instance Assault missions, Anajar, big game like Adamantois, the Behemoth King. Hell, you could even fight your friends to prove once and for all who's the hardest in a match of Ballista. I guess what I'm trying to say is that if you're a Final Fantasy fan, it's worth a look, even if like me you're not a fan of MMORPGs. The series' references and multiple exciting story arcs will keep you going. If you're the kind who mashes buttons through cutscenes though, and there are many of those sadly, why aren't you playing something else? World of Warcraft perhaps? However, of course you can still strive to get the best gear ever, like some of the more elitist or obsessive players will always do.